All right, welcome back in. Hang with Esther, presented by Richard Tana. Cody Worsham here with me on a Friday afternoon. We're going to talk a little LSU Ole Miss now with Richard Cross. Does a great job. Super Talk Mississippi, SEC Network. He's a guy that has as many jobs as I do. Richard, how you doing today?
Jacob, what's up, man? Happy Friday.
You as well. Glad to have you on as always. Tough time out for Ole Miss. They had a 17-point lead against Auburn. That game ends in overtime. Auburn finds a way to win that contest, and that's one of those ones that is going to be a hard pill to swallow. Ole Miss played so good in the first half in that game. What went wrong for the Rebels there in the second half and then the overtime?
Yeah, part of it was what went right for Auburn. Auburn missed their first 11 threes of the first half, so they were 0 of 11 from the field. And I don't know how much attention you've paid to Auburn so far this season. Obviously, they're sitting there at 18-2, which is really good. Auburn is scary good when they make threes. When they don't, like they didn't in the first half, they're fairly pedestrian. They're incredible at home and have been all season long. This is a road game, and it's a talented roster, but it's a different team than what Auburn had a year ago when they made the run to the Final Four. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is, Breon Tyree, who was averaging about 26 a game in SEC play, had only 8 points in the game. He got into foul trouble. He missed the last 5 minutes of the game. And the issue that Ole Miss has had really throughout the season has been getting consistent offensive production from anybody not named Breon Tyree. Blake Henson had a pretty serious medical issue in the summer and didn't join the team until around the 1st of December and kind of has not gotten into a consistent rhythm. KJ Buffin has not been consistently good enough. Devontae Shuler had his best game of the year against Auburn, but has not been good really consistently to this point. And so it was just a combination of, in the second half, Ole Miss not making nearly as many shots. Auburn made more shots. And, the point you made to start, though, I think is a valid one. That's a tough one to get past. But the thing, Jacob, is this really isn't new. You look at Ole Miss, they've only got one win in SEC play. They had a big lead against LSU when they played them in Oxford. They had the big lead against Auburn. They have had leads in a couple of other games that they've not been able to hang on to, and that's the reason they're sitting there with only one win in league play.
Is that the difference between this year and last year? They had a lead against Arkansas heading into overtime. They actually had a 6-point lead. They lose that game 76-72. And so to your point, last year they probably maybe exceeded expectations, right? Kermit Davis comes in, first-year guy. And it's not necessarily that they're failing this year. They're just not finishing the games where they have these leads.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. And, the other piece is you had Terrence Davis on that roster a year ago, which I saw a tweet from, I guess it was Kendrick Perkins earlier today, who thought it was ridiculous that Terrence Davis was not named to the, whatever it is they call it for the NBA All-Star, the Futures team or the Bright Horizon.
Rising Stars, yeah.
Yeah, the Rising Stars game, because he is a rising star and has outperformed what everybody thought he was going to do. Kind of gambled on himself, turned down a couple of two-way offers, and ended up getting a 2-year deal with Toronto, and has been really, really good. So you had that piece. You knew with Terrence Davis a year ago the potential for a big scoring output was there. But more so than that, he had the ability to kind of change the game with his athleticism and his defense. So that's missing. You haven't seen the step forward from Buffin and Henson that I mentioned a second ago. Devontae Shuler has been inconsistent, and a couple of the young guys that they brought in on this team that they thought were going to kind of be impact players, they haven't gotten there yet. And so it's been kind of a combination of those things. You look at the returning guys, so there's some experience, obviously, with Tyree, who's a senior, and Shuler, who's a junior, and Buffin and Henson, who are sophomores. But after that, there's a huge drop-off in terms of experience in the SEC, and it's a pretty big contrast, right, between Ole Miss and LSU. The reason that LSU is sitting there at 7-0 is because they've been able to close out close games. Prior to the win against Alabama, what was it, 5 straight where it was 4-point games or less that they're able to win. And you look at Ole Miss, who pretty easily could be 4-3 in the league right now, but because they haven't been able to close out with leads at the end, they're sitting there at 1-6.
You mentioned Shuler. He had 26 last game, got to the free throw line 18 times. I'm sure some of that was just the fact that Tyree wasn't playing well, was on the bench with foul trouble, and he had to kind of fill in his shoes. But if he can play well alongside Tyree, if they can kind of be that 1-2 punch that people thought they would get from Ole Miss coming into the season, Is that the recipe for them to kind of turn things around?
I mean, I think it's part of it, but it's got to be – it's kind of a collective effort, and you need Tyree playing well. So it doesn't have to be 26 a game from Tyree. Like I mentioned a second ago, he's averaging in league play. But, if you can get 16 to 18, maybe 20 from Tyree, and then, Schuler can give you 10 or 12 and not turn it over, and he's got a handful of assists. And Buffin does a little bit, and Hadim C., who I haven't mentioned, kind of the big guy, stays out of foul trouble. Then they've got a chance. In terms of this matchup in particular, LSU, they're such a different team than what they were a year ago, and yet they're still incredibly athletic. It feels like Wofford's getting better. Has played some of his best basketball as of late. When I look at LSU, for me, and this isn't like breaking news, but it all starts with Skylar Mays. He's seen so much and he's done so much. And even when he doesn't have a big scoring game, it feels like he's got a knack for the big shot. And so I feel like it's a difficult matchup. I think it's a really athletic LSU team. Ole Miss has not consistently done a great job stopping the ball on drives to the basket. And they've kind of gotten into some trouble. That's really what Auburn did. In addition to making some outside shots, they had a bunch of guys that were willing to just kind of put their head down, go to the basket, get to the free throw line, and chip away and give themselves a chance for the win, which ultimately they got.
Richard Cross, Super Talk Mississippi, SEC Network, is our guest here on Hanging with Hester. Hey, real quick, I'd like to transition to football. Of course, you do a great job covering it all for Ole Miss there. We were talking earlier. We had Chad Jones on the show who played two sports at LSU. We're talking Mo Hampton, who's trying to play two sports at LSU. Obviously, Ole Miss is dealing with that as well. John Rice Plumlee, LSU fans know him very well. He's a baseball guy. And also, Lane Kiffin's coming in, so you're having this new offense, and your quarterback's going to be trying to play baseball and learn a new offense. Have they kind of talked about maybe how they're going to handle that, what the schedule's going to be?
They've not been public about that yet. I think it's fascinating. And it's not just John Rice Plumlee. It's also Jerrion Ely.
Right.
So, a super freshman running back last year for Ole Miss. So you've got two guys that are trying to do that. And it's a little weird, Jacob. I don't know if you had teammates that tried to do both. It doesn't feel like there are many places where you have two sport guys, but I feel like LSU is a place where you have seen some of that with football and baseball. And they've been able to manage it. To me, the most high-profile instance of that happening recently is at Oklahoma with Kyler Murray. Obviously, he gets drafted top 5 and then ultimately decides to go the football route. I think this is fascinating, and a lot of people have looked at that and say, okay, it's one thing for a running back or a cornerback or a safety or a punter to try and play two sports. It's a different deal when you're talking about a quarterback, especially when you're talking about a quarterback who clearly needs to get better in the passing game. Now, John Rice Plumlee, you mentioned it a second ago, LSU is kind of the poster child for him hurting a team, with his feet. That's there, but he's got to improve as a passer. I have no idea what the quarterback situation is going to look like. If you had asked me before Matt Luke was let go, I would tell you that at least two guys were going to transfer out. It looked like Matt Corral, just because he kind of lost the job, and he's really talented, he's a former 5-star, and he's from California, was going to make the transition, although I don't think he ever actually entered the transfer portal. And then you had a couple of other guys that either put their name in the portal or decided, well, I'm going to look at it. Everybody came back. Is that going to be the case after spring? Probably not. I would assume that they lose a quarterback. But I don't know exactly how you manage this. My guess is that Mike Bianco and Lane Kiffin will work together on this, and they will figure out a way to allow Plumlee and Ely to be part of as much spring football as they can. Ole Miss is going to start a little bit later this year with spring football, but Lane Kiffin wants it all to be on the backside of spring break, so you don't have that week off in the middle of spring camp. But that coincides with once SEC play has begun. So, it may – some of it may be, okay, do these guys hit? How much are they playing baseball? If they're just kind of into the bench guys where they're not really playing, then I would expect they would not miss much spring football at all. If you get Jerrion Ely or John Rice Plumlee who are starting in the outfield and they're both hitting over 300, maybe it's a little more difficult thing to navigate. But to me, it's going to be fascinating if this is a one-year deal, if it's a one-year deal for both of them, or if it turns out to be a multi-year thing where they try and do this all the way through.
All right, he is Richard Cross. Does a great job there. Super Talk Mississippi, SEC Network, ESPN. Richard, always appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jacob.